All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for the next 2 items in our show. For later today at 4:30, Schöne Ecke will be recording their 300th podcast live here on stage for us. But right now, we have Max for us with the Airtable walkthrough, which helped us make the MMX possible. So, Max, floor is yours.
Thank you. So this is my walkthrough of the Airtable system that the CAD team used to aggregate all of our data across all of the work that we did. So it is a deep dive, or how to fix only some of your problems, because some of your problems are made by Martin, and you can't fix those. So what is Airtable? Airtable is basically it's a spreadsheet, but they made it smarter, and you can access it anywhere in the world, unlike Excel sheets. It also, from what's on Wikipedia, allows different types of information to be in every column. So a column can be set as a specific type of information, be it a checkbox, a phone number, a specific piece of text, a number we need to know or write down. I will go into the fact that in Discord, in the meetup discussion, I have set a bunch of links. You're more than welcome to look at them, but you don't need to. I'll be showing them up here anyways. So Airtable has some parts that I'm going to be referring to specifically. Each row you see is a record. It specifies a group of information that is contained in and of itself. It defines a single part, a single image, a single video. Each column is a field, and that field has a different text type to each and every other one. So in here you see we've got an attachments field, a number field, we even have a date field, and all of those fields kind of connect together. And we also have a interconnected record field, and I'll go more into that later. Airtable also has a little bit of automation and scripting, which necessarily allows us to be able to do some more batch updates as we need to. This specific one is a kind of a smaller one. It just lets us grab YouTube thumbnails without having to specifically go out and look for them, which is really nice when you're importing 180 different videos. You don't have to go look for each and every single thumbnail. Precisely, we can just do it out of a thumbnail link slide. So there are some general information that we kind of gathered and we're using. And so we have an episode reference. And I'll kind of move over onto an actual one. So each single set here is a video. And we, within our episode reference, we're also taking videos from more than just Martin. You can see here we have a video that is how the Funkalizer works from Carlos, all of that. These are all here, and these allow us to know this information as we need for the CAD team, and all of that is given to us in detail. We can kind of scroll down through, and we have every single video that Martin made. It's in here with all of its data, and that was a team effort from a bunch of us scraping all of those videos and keeping that information up to date as more videos came out. So we go on to photo references, because of course you can't just have video, you also need to have still frame images. So these videos come directly from Martin or are specifically good YouTube screenshots that we want to save. And most of the time they're of locations on the machine that we can't really see. As you see here, this is just the bottom of the machine, a spot Martin has never put a camera, probably will never put a camera, because you can't really tell a good story shooting at the bottom of the machine. But these are all photo referenced in Airtable as well. We also need to know who's working on what and where. So we have an entire section for individuals collaborating with us. And so we have a list of every single person that's said, I'm willing to help, and we have all of the details that they've given us as to how good they are at CAD software and what CAD software they're comfortable with, and that helped us figure out who we're going to pair up and how, what parts they're going to be given to work. So the next thing is we have parts. We call this parts assignment because that's most of what we did with the parts, but every single part is labeled, sectioned, it's got an image, and it tells us exactly what has gone on with that part. And we can also take all of the information from the first three sections that I've talked about and put it into a part. So we know exactly who is touching that part and how. We have all of the photos taken of that part, and we have a section that tells us you need to go look at these specific sets of images to find this part in any image. Same thing with any video, specifically videos that discuss that part. So there's no use in saying, yes, there's good shots of the vibraphone, unless it's a shot of the vibraphone holder being made, and there we can actually sit down and work with it. This is a kind of fun one, because if we go into, oh, went too far. God, where did I put it? No, I put it later. Haha, that's what I did for myself. I'll go into that later. We also have the idea vault. If any of you were on the Discord, you know that we were taking information from people on Discord that wanted to give their ideas to Martin, and this is how we stored them, categorized them. Which is kind of a large task to do when you're getting quite a lot of data in from people, and all of these good ideas, we have to sort them, categorize them, and figure out how best to deliver them to Martin. And we'll go into that in more detail. We also need to split the machine up, because we can't just necessarily say, you get this part, where does that part end, where does that part begin? We need to know what it is. And so we have assemblies that split the machine into much larger parts. Think of this as sections of the frame and everything in between those sections. That allows us to separate out parts specifically. We have several assemblies. These fit within an assembly, and they give us a specific smaller grouping. And these are set to have a single function. So it is just the demag notizing wheel as a subassembly of the side frame, I believe. And all of that allows us to specify this is the part you're working on, this is where all of the information that comes from all of that should live. PM tracking, this is kind of a quick, short one. We also need to know if people are available to do work. So we have a way to track people's time in and out, availability through time. We also have, from Martin, but we rarely used it as the CAD team, a bill of materials. It's a part list. It tells us roughly what parts were used, where they were. And that allows us to, when working through CAD, have some idea of what that part was going into it. Yes, there's just a long list of everything that's in the treadle pedal. This is the kind of detail we're getting. And this is the kind of detail we needed at some points in the CAD team to be able to kind of really sit down and take them and make them into CAD properly, knowing the correct sizing of holes and that sort of general nonsense. We also do have hardware. This is where we're getting, is this an M6 or an M8? Because Martin never puts a ruler near the machine, which is annoying when we're trying to figure out dimensions. So parts. So here, each part is labeled with general information. And I'll scoot over so we can actually look at the part. Where are we? One more? Where did I put it? I put it somewhere. Then I'll have to go find it. This can sometimes be long when we're using just so much data that software gets slow on me. Yes, okay. So all of our parts have different amounts of detail. And so we'll just sit through and look at the hand crank here. So the hand crank in and of itself has a bunch of information that we need to know where it is. So we need to know what section it is, what assembly it's in. And then the kind of the part status here, as you see, is our CAD team's ability to know where the part is in its current work. And all of these are photos, videos, and then we come to information that's really helpful as to figure out the relationship of the parts to each other. So we have how is this part driven? How does it function? What does it drive? We can also go into later on, if it were to take marbles, we have a section for marbles traveling to and from that part. And we have specifically what it travels to and from, and that helps us understand exactly what parts are doing what in what functions. We then continue on with more kind of specifying out to people, more video sets out, and there is just a lot of data. Each and every single one of these little sections here is a data point that was and is useful to us to know, and it culminates in us having quite a specific amount of detail on parts, and this is why we're using this software, not a general database, is we need to be able to adjust who and how we're working with our data. So there are then specific types of data, and I've set out 4 different parts here, and I'll kind of walk you through them. We have the people data, so who is doing what on a specific part. Then specifically, I've pulled out the 112 tooth gear. That is the only part that is both driven and drives something, has marbles going in and out of it, and then it is the only part that is attached and then attaches to something else. It is the only part that has all 4 designations, which is a really interesting fact that we found across our work. We then also have kind of status updates. So what section is it in? How difficult is it to CAD? The rhythm machine specifically has no CAD, and we'll go into that specifically later. So, and then we come to the X-rays, where I've just put out our ability to look at the specific type of information for photos, videos, along with our specific URL to our Fusion, because Fusion was exactly how we were taking all of this information and processing it into a 3D model. It was all through Fusion 360. Yes. Yes. So this is a more detailed breakdown of exactly what that looks like in our software for part being driven to drives. We have this part is the programming plates. So it is driven and is attached to the programming wheel and skeleton. They go together, but any power is specifically put through the programming plate onto the registers from the programming wheel. That's why these parts are listed in that specific fashion. So we can go over to our data visualizations. All of that data allows us to make funky little graphs. So if we go over, this graph here, you may not be able to clearly see it, but I'll try to zoom in as I can, is the marble flow path. So it specifies exactly how the marbles are transiting through the machine. Unfortunately, Airtable doesn't know exactly where these parts are in relation to the world and the machine. So all of our marbles travel directly up through the first marble interlane, and then go through the 2 ring lifts into the demag wheel in the wrong order. They should not be descending here, but Airtable does not know that. We then come to the fun section, which is exactly all of the gates. So we start with the marble divider, and we split out to the different type of gate, and then split out to the instruments. And then this dark maroon section is the funnels and PMMA, along with the tracks that bring it all back to the first ring lift. We can continue on, and I'll show you this one. This, if it will let me open it, is the driving connections. So we specify where power, and in this case, mechanical power is coming from, and where it goes into. So of course, we have to start with Martin. Martin is the end-all, be-all, start and end of all power on the machine. So we'll go over to the left first. We start with specifically calling out all of the pieces that Martin would ever touch, the hand crank, the treadle pedal, along with all of the different levers that are out here. These all are parts that Martin is driving, even though you can't necessarily think of it as driving, they do drive. All of that goes out to the belts, pulleys, all the way through the machine. As you can see here, this is the driving connection I was talking about earlier. The programming wheel drives the programming plates, which drive the registers. We do also have some points that circle back on themselves. Specifically, the motor and the flywheel circle back on themselves because they drive themselves internally. The last one, no, that's not what I wanted. Close that out, thank you. Is how things are attached to each other. Unfortunately, Airtable, being what it is, does not allow more than 100 parts in a flowchart, so we can't show all 147 parts. So this, unfortunately, is a lie. Airtable does not let us see all of those parts together, which means that, unfortunately, that component flow is basically useless to us at some point. Sorry, Airtable. So, yes, these images, I wasn't necessarily sure I was going to be able to show them to you, so I've attached them here anyways. So, yes, going back to the Idea Vault. So, many of the people on Discord, and I assume many of you were or are on the Discord, were providing ideas when Martin was asking for them. And in this fashion, this is how we've stored them in the Idea Vault. It's a central sorting of all of the bulbed ideas across the machine. And that culminates into us splitting them out by specific designations as to what each idea is. And this specifically is all of the marble gate ideas listed out in a gallery. Much of this information visually can be found on the Discord by the specific channel that was made for each issue. And this allows us, at a glance, to give this to Martin, to visualize, to see what people have made, what images people have decided are best to show their ideas out to Martin. And this is the way we've done so for specifically the marble gate, though we do also happen to have a specific gallery for each and every single type of design. Yes. We start with the CAD team. This is where stuff actually gets nitty-gritty. Everything before was a lovely introduction to Airtable and what it is, and we get down to the real meat of the issue, how as a CAD team we have taken Airtable and put that all together into something that is functionally able to be used by the team across the board. So the purpose of the CAD team is is and was to create an accurate 3D CAD model of the MMX as it stood in Martin's workshop. And we've continued that on into the machine as it is currently standing now, though that has not completely been updated to this point. Part of that included making it color accurate such that we can get fun visuals like this one, where parts appear to be correctly colored in. So that leadership team was led mostly by Tim Keller and Maureen. Both are not here. Many of the people, besides myself, on this list specifically are not here. So those two individuals led the CAD team as it was, and that broke down into smaller and shorter roles. And my specific role within this was production support, so I was working with the Airtable, ensuring that it was working correctly, up to date, and easily accessible to all of the team that was using it in any of their capacities. So I do have all of the names of every person that worked on here. Feel free to not try and read them all. Everything in here, from the E-team that was working with us, anyone that contributed materials is also listed out here. Ideas that Martin specifically took and noted are listed out. The management team, our production management team, PM team is here. Our CAD teams, so we split out to specific sections of the machine to a specific individual and had them lead all of the CAD modelers below them, because at some point we do need a division of labor to manage all of our actual laborers in the model team. Then we also have a post-CAD team, which was everyone trying to color accurate machine along with producing a model. We do also have a rendering team that produced the lovely image that I showed you before. So, oops, sorry. We also have the Idea Vault. They weren't specifically working with the CAD model themselves, but these people are of importance to us and the work that was done. So we've listed them out here along with the wiki development, the moderators, and the subtitling team. You wouldn't necessarily think that subtitles would be important to CAD, but I'll get on to the specificity of how that is important to us soon. So how do you manage 100 people? You could just use Maureen, whose job before this was doing production management on large-scale theater productions, but then that doesn't really actually do anything, so just kidding. You work with Maureen, and you make a process for everything. You document everything, and you delete absolutely nothing. Don't delete it, just don't. So a lot of our soft setups are made so that only specific people can delete anything. Yes. Yes, okay. Sorry. And then real life comes first. So because this is a volunteer team, no one on the CAD team was ever working as an actual job, so we were always making it in such a way that people can just walk away as need be. We always like to say real life comes first, and this is how we're able to manage people, giving them the option to step away as needed. So specifically Airtable and the CAD team, we have a production management team. So this is the production management team, and our specific roles as listed. Each of these individuals, and some of these individuals have no ability to use CAD software. Their singular entire role is to help us manage all of the data information that's coming in, be it images, videos, and then at some point we start having to deal with parts. Oh God. We have to figure out exactly where a part is in our process. Who last worked on it? Is it ready to go on to the next section of our process? And each of these individuals were helping us work through that. So we come to the data management part. We have to know where parts are going, who technically has rights to be working on that part. Fusion doesn't allow us to section out parts individually to a specific user. So we have to know who should be working on that part, who is working on that part, and if they're done working with that part. We have a known, well-reviewed process. That also means that our process has to be internationally available at any time and understandable at any time. We did have individuals working at the exact opposite hours of the EU and the US, in places like Australia and Japan, who can't necessarily be awake and available on Discord when we can answer their questions. So we have a well-reviewed process for all of our work. We have notes on everything. We keep a detailed log of everything, and that's how we also get Airtable sections that are hundreds of pages long, that specify exactly all of the minute detail we've ever figured out that we needed. We also have to include any new information that's put in. If we decide we're now going to track exactly what color that part is, we have to go back through all of our parts and put in that new information for all previous parts. So we come back to some of our sections, and I'll kind of go through exactly how they were useful to the CAD team. So we have all of the notes. Anytime we spoke about them in a CAD team meeting, we specified out a note, and we talked about how, where and how those assemblies were discussed within that meeting. We then also have the transcripts of the videos. That word is listed out in subtitle red from Discord. Those transcripts allow us to specifically look at whatever Martin was talking about, and we can figure out sometimes the points at which specific detailed information is talked about. We don't have to go look through each and every single video to find exactly when a certain part of a certain piece was talked about. Because it's all fine and good to know that there are 6 videos that contain information about the vibraphone, but exactly where the felt for the vibraphone was discussed, it's good to have a transcript for that. And so in CAD team meetings, we'd often have the go look at the notes in episode 112 for your part changes. So specifically, that allows us to put that type of note to the CAD modeler, whether they're there at a meeting or not. Most of our process was made in such a way that an individual could work on their part and basically never show up to a CAD meeting, and we could get them the information they needed from our notes at any time. Photo references. So I know I went over this a little bit, and I'll kind of quickly run through them. We also have to note what parts are specified in each video and whether or not those images are still up to date at some point. We come to the fun part of meetings. So each of the teams out here listed are a specific set of people that worked on a specific thing. So we have general CAD meetings, which are generally looking at models and doing model reviews. We have a production management meeting because we can't just have those separately. That's where we're kind of figuring out processes. The rendering and inventory, idea vault, organizing, the wiki, and the simulation team were kind of as needed. Those groups worked by themselves to schedule them. And then, of course, we have to have team leader meetings where a team leader for a specific section can specify the issues that they're having with their parts, and how do we take those larger assemblies and put them into Fusion together. So across those teams, we average about an hour and 48 minutes per meeting, which is kind of a nice time to have a meeting. Of course, there is the tail ends of that. There are some of our meetings that just about touch 6 hours. Those were so fun to be a part of. Note the sarcasm there. But that does mean that we can have CAD teams that are right about 2 hours, which is exactly what we wanted. In total, meetings, recorded meetings took up about 200 hours of time, And if we count the time that people spent in meetings, it roughly comes out to half of a year that people sat in meetings across this entire project. So the specificity of meetings for the CAD team is we always had someone leading that meeting as a specific leadership to the team. We're always working to a point, working to a goal. What is the next thing we want to have finished? What list are we trying to work to? The other thing is we're an international team. At some point, we're working with 100 different modelers in 14 time zones, so we have to skip and come back. If someone is like, I can't really come right now, but if you give me 15 minutes, I can come. So we often skip and come back, working around people. We had one individual in Australia who was only ever available for the first half hour of a meeting and then would go to bed. So we would always discuss their parts first, which, sure, it's a little bit priority by necessity, but it is what it is. If any of you are ever looking for what is the best time for a meeting, it's about 5 p.m. Europe time, which correlates to about 8 a.m. in California. California goes, no, I don't want to wake up that early. Everybody else goes, too bad. We often have watch parties of videos. If there's a video that's come out for the machine that we have not yet seen, the group will sit down after our meeting and watch it. We also always have someone taking notes. Someone is always taking notes. We're always putting out Discord pings as needed. We're always updating everything. So the CAD work, finally, here we are. These are all of our team leaders and the specific sections of the machine that they were specifically responsible for, including the parts and modelers below them. This is kind of a long list. I'm more willing to discuss the list specifically later in the Q&A section. So the modeling. There is kind of a discrepancy in how things are modeled. It's not always necessarily nice. We do also just then have parts like the rhythm machine that were made with cardboard, the angle grinder, and a love for a Dremel. I don't know why. Why, Martin, why? But all of these parts kind of have to be worked together. That does mean that sometimes all of our notes for a part look exactly like this versus the very lovely CAD work that was done for the, oh gosh, what is that part? Well, the timing clutch, yes, the timing clutch. These were made, these images were specifically made by machine thinking when he was designing and building them, and then when we got them, and hey presto, we basically have our part done for us before we even get to it. And then we have something that is just a hand drawing, something that's been welded up, and then we also have a crushed instrument. Now, that being said, some of Martin's methods for making his parts are exactly how we then modeled them. So for making the detents in the ring, our modeler basically found out where the correct position was by putting the detent in its spot and then rotating around and putting a dent everywhere the detent was needed, which is exactly what Martin did. So yay, Martin can actually design something to be properly processed later. We do also then have not also documentation for how a part should be handled as a data management point, but also how it should be modeled. The discussion of should it be modeled top down or bottom up. If you don't understand what those words mean, you're lucky. If you do, I will not discuss them with you. I don't care. So we also then have to have reference points. We can't really specify your part is 3 millimeters from the other. We always specify from the front left foot and say the front left foot should be exactly this distance and this orientation from your part. We then also have a skeleton. It is just a list of points in 3D space that specify out how and where parts should go in relation when we're making larger assemblies. And we have CAD modeling standards, which produce lovely little images like this, where we specify parts out to a simple form factor rather than a more complicated detail. That's mostly due to the fact that Fusion 360 does not like when you import 17,000 parts. If any of you have ever done something with CAD software, this model would routinely break even the most high-performant computers for about a half hour trying to load that model. And so we're doing everything in the CAD team to reduce model size as much as possible and work to something that is simple for even the most detailed parts to be opened and used by anyone as needed. Yes, so parts. When assigning a part for CADing, we often had teams of 2 people, someone that was very experienced with CAD software and then someone that was not as experienced, because we don't necessarily want to say, no, you can't help us, you don't have the skills. So we did have this working as a pair of people working. And so that allow, you'd say that's a little bit complicated to do. We specified out parts that were by complexity where people were. We're not going to assign something to the US and Australia. That doesn't work. So we're trying to find close time zones to work together. I do think I had another one. Yes, language. So if 2 individuals better spoke Swedish than English, we would sometimes pair them up, and they would be able to model in Swedish rather than English, as long as I can understand it at the end of the day. I don't necessarily care how it was modeled, or if it was modeled on a Swedish version of Fusion 360. So we come to the extra points that we were doing along with the CAD team. Jeff Strader from Fusion 360 was working with a specifically defined how can we optimize Fusion 360 for large models. And so we helped out figuring out that there was, at some point, it would, even if you were to delete a texture, it would re-import that texture back in every time you loaded that assembly into a larger assembly. So if someone accidentally loaded on a texture once, it was there throughout the entire chain, even 3 files later. And so we helped kind of clear that out of certain problems. We then worked with the E-team, people like machine thinking, to get their parts and documentation from them. It's really nice if we can have parts that were nicely detailed in the documentation that they made and gave to Martin, whether it be videos, photos, or like even paper design drawings at some point are useful to the CAD team as they were working. So that leads us to right here, right now. We do have the CAD team still working with the people who are working on the machine. Their talk is scheduled for 4 p.m. today. We'll see when that actually arrives today, because that was scheduled 25 minutes before I got on here. So they really, we're not at this point doing any major redesign to the CAD as it is, though we're adding parts that were put on, and any part that is sadly been removed, specifically the vibraphone tracks, those have been or will be switched out. And so we're getting it to work to a standard to where it's modeled with the issues it's got and how it will stay as the museum uses it. That's a funny GIF. Here's all the people I've taken photos from, just so there is a set that I didn't just steal them. Any questions? Are we getting a microphone back there?
Yes.
Someone is running out with a microphone. Haha.
Hello, I know you were restricted to COVID, but did you ever use any 3D scanning?
3D scanning, I don't believe we did. A little bit? Oh.
Yeah, so we did did a little bit of 3D scanning, but it wasn't that successful because we tried mostly using an iPad, but it was just too complicated to get any good detail out of. And yeah, I think it was they tried comparing against the actual models that we created, and our models were always much more accurate to the actual machine. Yeah, so yes, but it didn't really work.
For information, the individual holding the microphone is Nelsonian, who is part of many of the teams that worked on
CAD
this.
team, PM team, all the teams.
Yeah, all of the teams. Yeah, so no 3D software scanning was used in creating the CAD software. We found it just didn't work to a detail that we could reliably use, and it also was making incomplete flat sheets out of stock because it's just trying to find points. And anywhere we want to reduce the number of points and vertices in the model, and 3D scanning makes more than it needs to.
Yeah,
it'll take a flat sheet and make it into 100 different points instead of just specifying out the 4 corners of a square.
And because we wanted to be able to use the CAD to remake parts, you wouldn't be able to tell the edges and boundaries of where one part starts, one part stops from the...
So thank you everybody for coming out. This has been wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I think we're good. Thank you, Video Village.